Here we are. We got a big old class today. Lots of students online with me. We're going to keep working on Acts chapter 14. I hope it's not too scary. It's a pretty exciting chapter, though, so that'll be pretty good. All right, so let us get started. I'll start my screen share. All righty. Now, what we saw in Acts chapter 14 was, there you go, get focused. There you go, little guy. That Paul was preaching to some people, and some of them got grouchy about it. And even though he was doing miracles, they decided to be jerks about it, which is pretty sad. And so then he went to a different place. Paul kept preaching, but he had to go to a different place. And when he went to this different place, he saw with these eyes, he fastened his eyes on him. So I drew it weirdo, gross like that. This dude who had the faith to be healed, and Paul fixed his legs, and so they grew strong. But unfortunately, everyone in town thought that they were Greek gods. They thought that Barnabas was Jupiter with lightning bolts, and that Paul was Mercury with winged feet. And so Paul and Barnabas, they didn't like that, so they preached a sermon, and that sermon is we summed it up in these ideas last time, that we are not gods. Instead, we're here with the gospel, which is about a living God who made everything and who has shown himself to the world and has shown himself that he is good. Okay, so that was where we left off. He preached that preaching, and with these sayings, he scarcely restrained, with these sayings, scarce restrained they the multitudes from doing sacrifice unto them. So Paul is trying to preach with his hands up saying, no, don't sacrifice to me. I'm just a man. But he almost like couldn't get them to do it. All right. So, oh my goodness, that's a really loud mouth. I don't think he was that scared, but you get the idea. So there's Paul, and they're coming up with hands full of sacrifice stuff. So I'm putting sacrifice stuff like that. I don't have, and a cow. I don't know how they picked up the cow. But here's the cow. They're somehow carrying a cow in the air. My cow looks like a pig, though. Oh, well. It's a piggy cow. So there they are bringing the cow. Saying no. Okay.
Piggy.
But there came Jews thither. What a wonderful word. Have you guys ever heard the word thither? What does thither mean?
No.
They went hither and thither, is old-fashioned language. Basically mean some Jews came there. Jews came to this city from Antioch and Iconium, and having persuaded the multitudes, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing that he was dead. This is pretty extreme. Hey, it's the gods, it's Zeus, it's Mercury, it's Jupiter, this is awesome, let's do sacrifices. And then some other people come to town and say, no, hit him in the head with rocks until he's dead. And they did it.
Bad idea.
This is so extreme. Have you ever heard of any story in the Bible where somebody comes to town and people are really excited about him and putting palm fronds in front of him because they love him so much, and then a week later they kill him?
Yes. Stephen? Jesus.
Paul is very literally living out some of the life of Jesus here. Isn't that harsh?
Yeah. I wonder, they were just worshiping him, and then they're like, I agree with that guy. Let's kill him.
It's bad. It's really sad. Now, I don't think any of us are ever going to have to go through stoning, but we might have some troubles in our lives. We need to read this story and get ourselves ready. Do you know what I mean? All right,
yes.
Let's go back to the story. Okay. So let's first talk about the stoning. So here's, okay, I'm going to put Paul, give him X's for eyes, because that's what we do when he's dead, and his tongue sticking out, and his beard is all glockily. Yeah, well, he probably passed out. So there's his beard all glockily, and and here's his body, and here's his hand going, and here's his hand going,
You don't have to draw all of it, just find.
and
one that
then you
like
can
it.
just draw rocks, which I think are going to look like polka dots on him, which doesn't work, but you get the idea. Oh, so if you draw lines on the rocks, then it looks like the rocks are flying. Yeah, that's how you make it look like.
Flying polka dot.
Yeah, flying polka dots. That's, well, you get the idea. So there he is. How about this? One eye is X'd because they think he's dead, and the other eye is just sleeping. How about that? One eye is X'd, and one eye is asleep. Poor guy, right? This is terrible. Now, here is something I did. Did I draw very big rocks?
No.
No.
These are pretty little. Do you think they threw little pebbles at him?
No.
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 They probably
That'd
threw
just
big
be
ones.
annoying, not kill him.
Blood whip.
Yeah.
They threw stones.
Yeah.
Blood whipping from him.
I'll probably have to do that. Let me go ahead. I'll put blood by every rock that's on his body because it's true. I mean, sometimes you're like, oh wow, and it's gory, but this is kind of sad, isn't it? Right? And you can draw some blood, like he has a bloody nose, and yeah, this is just kind of sad. All right, so there he is. I'll color him in green later. The prophet color that I've been using. Okay. So they supposed he was dead. They dragged him out of the city. But as the disciples stood around him, he rose up and entered into the city. And on the morrow and the next day, he went forth with Barnabas to Derbe. And when he had preached the gospel to that city and had made many disciples, they returned to Lystra and Iconium and to Antioch. And they do some other things. We'll read that in just a second, okay? So around Paul, there's a bunch of disciples. Think about that. What is the disciple? What does the word disciple mean? Do you know what it means?
Followers of God.
Followers, definitely followers. Now, this is an interesting thing. The word disciple in the Bible, it's always talking about a disciple of Christ or a disciple of God. But the word didn't, when it was used in Greek, it wasn't about God necessarily. If you went to school and you had a teacher, you were a disciple of that teacher, whether they
So
were
the
talking about
disciples of
math
God?
or God. So disciple means like a following learner. Now, what do you think you feel like when you see that your leader that you're learning from is treated like this? Do you
Like,
think you want to keep following him after he gets hit in the head with rocks? I might be angry, like, yeah, they hurt him, but I might also be
A little scared.
like, do I want to keep following this guy if this is what happens to him? Am I going to follow into a big throwing rock fest myself? That's scary. But notice in the text, the disciples were there with him there, and when he goes to the next town, he makes many disciples. So he stands up. I'm not going to give him a smile. I'll give him a little smile, okay? I don't know how happy he's going to be. I'm going to give him a black eye. There's his beard. He got his beard under control. So there he is, black eye. And I'm going to put his arm in a sling because do you think that when he got up, he was just 100% perfect again?
Well, God could have made it like that, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, God could have. And if God did, I think it would have said so in the story, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that he probably had some blood on him or some wounds, right? I'll put some
Yeah.
around that eye.
Right nose.
Skinned knees, a bright red nose, skinned legs and knees. All right. So now he comes to the new city looking like this. And do people think, oh, that's the kind of guy I want to learn from? It looks like a very good teaching if he gets hit in the face with rocks all the time. Doesn't that sound scary? This is what's
Yeah.
really neat. So why do people listen to Paul? Why do you think they listen to him if he looks like this?
Because he's a good person.
He's a good person? That's
he
a big reason.
preaches,
He's a
he
follower
preaches
of God.
good things.
He preaches good things. People can tell that even though he's getting treated that way, if he is, whatever he's preaching, we know it's the gospel, right? We know it's the gospel. So the gospel message must have been really, really good if people were still willing to listen to Paul. Yes, Alice?
I think it's kind of obvious that he was that way, so they knew he was probably good.
Yeah, I think Paul was probably pretty obvious that he was a good guy. I think that's probably true. Okay. Now there's a lot of city names. We're going to do this in a second. They returned to Lystra and Iconium and to Antioch. What did they do when they were returning to these places? They were confirming the souls of those disciples, exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God. And when they had appointed for them elders in every church and had prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. Okay, so they go back through the cities that they were in. We'll talk about those cities on the map in just a second, okay? Let's figure out what they're doing. They go back through Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch. They go back through, and what do they say to the Christians that were there? Okay, they say they confirm their souls, probably like encouraging them and helping them. They exhort them to continue in the faith. They say, guys, stay in the faith. Do these things. It's worth it. Be with God. Go with the faith. And they also said, through many tribulations, we must enter the kingdom of God. Do you think that when Paul showed up looking like this, he looked like many tribulations?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've heard it in Bible class before. Oh, we're going to have trials. We're going to have hard times. And I go, okay. If Paul said it to me looking like that with his glasses all a mess, and he's got a black eye and all sorts of troubles. I don't know if this eraser can look like a black eye. Like, oh, we're going to go through tribulations. Oh, I believe that. That sounds bad. And so I think that that's what's going on. How do you think that those disciples felt when Paul said that?
I'm like, ooh, yikes. Okay.
Not sure.
Sad, not sure, yikes,
Scared. Red. Scared.
scared, absolutely. They probably felt every feeling that a person can ever feel at the same time.
Okay.
It was probably a very complicated day at church.
What
You know?
wait,
Yeah. Mhm.
funny feeling.
Is that okay? Is it okay to feel those conflicted feelings at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It makes sense. It makes sense. All right. And so then they commend them to the Lord on whom they believe. They say, God, take care of you. God bless you. I give you to God. Okay. Now let's talk about the map. All right. Let me open up the map here so we can get ready to draw it. Okay. And so at where we were looking at the beginning of the story, they were in Iconium here. And then they were in Lystra. They were in Lystra where they were treated like gods. And that's where they got stoned. They went down here to Derbe, and then they went back to these places. So that's what we're going to draw. All right, so let me push this up there, get that big. You guys can probably draw a lot of it even before I get there. We've been doing it a bunch.
What I do is at the very beginning of the class, before we even draw things, I just start on that.
You start a map up at the beginning.
Yeah.
Don't know what happened there.
That way I can always track everything down.
Like the Red Sea. I haven't drawn the Red Sea in a while. It's down there. All right. And then there's an island here. Okay. So they landed here and they went up to here, here, here. And then,
Mr. Dan,
yeah,
I thought of like, when the people were thinking a bunch of different things when they saw Paul, I just thought of like when some apostles or disciples got persecuted, but they were rejoicing that they were worthy to be persecuted for Jesus.
yeah. Do you remember that story? That happened a little bit. Oh, right, that's what I'm saying. That happened a little bit earlier when they were leaving. It was the Pharisees and the scribes and the priests that were persecuting them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that was something that they would probably try to share here.
Weren't Peter and John beaten and they praised?
And then Lystra's in here. All right. I don't know if you guys can read those on the board very well. Can you read that all right?
Yeah.
If you
It's yeah,
can't, if you can't get
Iconia,
the if you can't get the city names, it's okay. Just just something that's kind of close. Ooh, there's a baby waking up. All right. So what happens is they were here. That's where they people thought that they were gods, okay? And people came from this town to this town and got them stoned. So then they went down here after the stoning. But then they go right back. They go right back to the same cities. Why did I make it so small? You guys can hardly read that at all. Oh, let me do it again. I'll make it nice and big. Oh, silly. Doesn't really matter. Okay. They go from here, here. I'm not going to put in the city names this time. All right. Here was where Lystra, right? I am going to put in at least that one city name. Is that Lystra? Yeah. And Lystra is where they thought they were gods, but then these guys come down to town and they stone them. But what happens is they keep going from town to town, and then they go back to this city, back to this city, back to this city, back to this city. Remember how they were chased out of town everywhere they went? And in one of the towns, they got stoned to death, almost all the way stoned to death, right?
Yeah.
But they went back. Why would they go back?
Because they want to spread the gospel.
Uh-huh.
They knew
But they'd already spread the gospel there.
Want to spread it more.
people who didn't like them would
continue encouraging, check on how things are going.
They were encouraging the Christians that were there.
Spread
Maybe
it
they were
to
finding if there were some others that were listening. But in every town they went to, there were some Christians there after they preached. And so they go back to check on these Christians.
Question.
Say what?
Question.
Yeah. They would go back and they would check on those Christians, and that's where they would confirm them. They would exhort them in their faith. They would tell them through many tribulations, we must enter into the kingdom of heaven. Another thing that they did in each of those towns that I hadn't really mentioned yet was they appointed elders in all those churches, and they were praying with them, and they were fasting with them, and they were commending them to the Lord. And so basically they go back through those towns where there were new Christians, and they talk to those new Christians, and they help encourage those new Christians. Okay, now let's read some more in the story. We have to go into chapter 15 a little bit. And they passed through Pisidia and came to Pamphylia, Pamphylia. When they had spoken the word in Perga is the city, they went down to Attalia, and thence they sailed unto Antioch, from whence they had been committed to the grace of God for the work which they had fulfilled. which means this is the place that they had already started out from when they went to do this grace of God. What was their preaching word called here? All their preaching work, all their sharing of the gospel is called right here the grace of God. The grace of God had sent them out to that work. That's a really neat thing. Their preaching effort and their desire to help Christians and help people and bring people to God was the grace of God. And when they were come back to Antioch and gathered the church together, they rehearsed all the things that God had done with them and how he had opened a door of faith unto the Gentiles. And they tarried no little time with the disciples. What did Paul and Barnabas do with the Gentiles? What did God do with the Gentiles? Opened a door of faith. What does that mean? Opened a door of faith.
They preached God to them.
Yes.
They made them obey. They believed it a little more.
Yeah. Now here's the idea. If they open the door, does that mean that they forced people to go through?
No,
No.
just
It
an
just means
opportunity.
that they opened it and made it ready and available.
An
That's something that
opportunity.
we need to remember, is that we open the door. God opens the door, and then people decide if they're going to go in, right? There's the door open for faith. And then here's a funny little line that Luke says. Luke wrote the book of Acts. He's going to say this a lot. They tarried or stayed. We'll put the word stayed. They stayed no little time. What does it mean, no little time?
It means they stayed for a while.
Yes. You can change no to yes and little to lot. No little is the same as yes lot. They stayed a yes lot time. Luke has a way of using flowery language, and that's in almost all the translations, that they stayed no little time. Okay, let's get these other cities on the map. Okay, so they went through to the region of Pamphylia, to the city of Perga again, and they sail over here to Seleucia and go up, it looks like a river even, to Antioch. So now I'm going to put that on my map. Now you'll notice that since I made my map big, it's going to be a little bit wrong, but you'll get the idea. So they went back down to Perga. Then they sail to Seleucia. I'm just going to put an S because that Bible name isn't used very much. And then they went back to Antioch. Antioch's there. You'll notice that actually this one, I erased it, but this is also Antioch. Can it be possible that the same name is used for more than one town?
Yes.
Do people do that today?
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do. So they went all the way back to Perga, all the way across the water to S, and then up to Antioch. And Antioch is kind of like, it ends up being a little bit like Paul's headquarters. He goes and does a lot of things in Antioch, and it becomes a very important place in the book of Acts. We'll just keep seeing some stuff happening there. All right. Let's do a tiny little bit of chapter 15, because chapter 15 is long. I want to do a little bit of 15 so that we can do more of it in our class next time. Okay, so in Acts chapter 15, we won't do very much, but I want to get the background started. Okay, biggity bob. I've got to move fast because I've been tinkering around going slow. Here we go. Acts chapter 15. And certain men came down from Judea and taught the brethren, saying, except you be circumcised after the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. I don't know if that's exactly what their voices sounded like or not. And when Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension,
Again.
get it? That's what Luke does. No small can be yes, big. Oh, they didn't argue a little bit. they did argue a big bit, right? It's kind of like polite speech. Oh, it was no small dissension. Meaning they really argued a whole lot about it. Luke loves doing that little phrase. And we'll just put an exclamation mark because I think it's funny, and we're going to see it a bunch now in Luke, and I think it's fun. Okay, when Paul and Barnabas had yes, big argue and questioning with them, the brethren appointed Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So there's a question. What is the question? What is the question? What is the question? Do you know what the question is? Do you know?
It might be brush your teeth in the morning.
No, it's not brush your teeth. I think I did. You know what the question is? The argument is some people came up and said, except you be circumcised after the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. So some Christians, all right, okay, so Jerusalem's going to be like over here on the wall. I'm not going to draw on the wall. Good grief. So here's
Put a
Jerusalem.
piece of paper there.
Here's Jerusalem. Here we go. There's Jerusalem. My phone is Jerusalem. They came up to Antioch and said, you have to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses to be saved. What did Paul and Barnabas think about that?
That's
How do you know Paul and Barnabas did not like the teaching?
because it said so. They argued no small amount.
They argued no small amount. All right, let's draw them arguing no small amount.
Maybe you could yell, make them yelling across a lake.
Like mastodons belling, mastodons across the great deeps. So there's Barnabas. Oh, instead of the preaching hand, I'm going to do the preaching fist. So how do you draw a fist? Okay, like that. Be quiet. There's the preaching fist, and it's quivering with anger. I'm not good at drawing fists. Well, that one's a little bit better. And then here's Paul, and he's got his beard. I'm still going to give him a black eye. I'm going to say he's still hurt. And he's got preaching fists. And he's got his legs kicking up a storm. There's the dusty storm. There's his legs. And his arm is still in a sling, although for some reason now it's the other arm. I don't know how he figured out how to get his other arm in a sling. I made that mistake. Now, I should take away the angriness, right? Because I don't think these guys were angry. But they sure did argue about it. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now they're not as angry. But
mine's angry.
you're going to keep yours angry? That's okay. They're green. They're green, right?
Mr. Dan,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking maybe they were sad that they weren't listening or sad that they were not.
It could be. It could be. Now think about this. The argument that the other people are making is to be saved, you have to do circumcision and the old law. Where, actually, did they say old law? No, they say customs of Moses. Where would those people find out about circumcision and the customs of Moses?
10 Commandments?
10 Commandments. 10 Commandments don't mention circumcision necessarily, but the Ten Commandments and the law of the Old Testament. Is that right? That makes sense. Okay. But what was Paul and Barnabas preaching?
That Gentiles can be saved.
Okay. And by whose power can they be saved?
God.
God.
Jesus' power, the power of God and the power of Jesus. So these guys are preaching gospel, which is good news, right? They're preaching the gospel. Jesus saves. I like those two words because it's 5 letters and 5 letters. Jesus saves. That's what they've been preaching. That's what they've been preaching all along, right?
Yeah.
And then what do these people
Yeah.
say? Essentially, some people come up and say, oh, sure, but no. What? I mean, yeah, sure, Jesus saves, but circumcision and the customs of Moses. Which is a lot like saying, no, not Jesus, circumcision and customs of Moses. Can you understand why that would be upsetting?
Yeah.
Think about all the Christians in these cities. All of these Christians. Did Paul and Barnabas tell them about circumcision and the customs of Moses? No. No. So is it any surprise that Paul and Barnabas would have no small argument? And all chapter 15 is about that question and argument. The whole rest of the chapter, an entire chapter in the Bible is spent with people talking about this confusion.
And arguing.
I think I went too crazy.
Isn't that frustrating?
Mm.
Think about how much good work could be done. Nope, can't do that good work because these guys want to argue about a different idea. Well, here's an important thing to think about. Paul and Barnabas knew that it was a wrong teaching. And they knew it was a wrong teaching because they were hooked on to God. They knew what was right and they knew what they needed to do. If you stay hooked onto God, learning his word, understanding these things, if somebody says something weird like, you need ice cream in order to be saved, you'll go, I really like ice cream, but that's dumb. Like that doesn't make sense. No, that's not in the Bible. That's not what God is talking about. I like ice cream, but that's not what God. So if you guys and if you gals and if there's any puppies out there, I don't know if there's any pets listening.
Kitties.
If you guys are listening in and you keep this hold on to God's word, you'll be able to recognize this stuff. And when somebody says something weird about ice cream, you will be able to say, well, no, that's not what God talks about. And you'll have the right answers. All right, do you guys have any questions about our lesson today?
No.
No? All right. Well,
Thanks.
I'm going to sign off and I'll see you later. Bye.